Okay, Kelly, this one's for you, specifically. Got the illustrated version of my book. It's going to be coming out for a while, but maybe a while before I can get hold of a proof and get the thing actually published. Paperback's still out there. It didn't do anything. I'm hoping maybe an illustrated edition will catch some people's eyes. I still got a few copies of the illustrated book around here, but I've never been able to get out and distribute them, or the non-illustrated version. I've never been able to get out and distribute to libraries. There's one down at Summersville. A friend of mine down in Georgia bought one. That's about as far as they went. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to bring up the illustrations which appear in the book and give you an idea for a flavor of the story. Of course, it is centered on our favorite half-elf character, an old Dungeons & Dragons character run by me way back when. James William Booth. Actually, the great-great-great-grandfather of one John Wilkes Booth, and we all know what happened to him. But J-Dub is basically just an adventurer. He's an ex-soldier turned mercenary, fighter for hire, who got himself into a little bit of a mess when he let a former friend's daughter get kidnapped at her coming-of-age ceremony. Not exactly a good idea, considering that the lady is now a duchess. He has quite a bit of money to put a bounty out on his head, and not only that, but a reward for the return of the daughter, and a hired gang of thugs do her bidding under the guise of palace security. Yes, she is a duchess. Not only that, but the lady happens to be a love interest of Booth's, although she doesn't realize it yet because he's never said anything. Some of that starts creeping out in the second book, which I started and never finished. Let me close this picture. J-Dub is returning to his hometown from years abroad. The town has kind of fallen on some hard times, but it is still relatively prosperous. You can see the number of city buildings in red, which are used for various activities. Yellow buildings are inhabited residences, and blue buildings are unoccupied but ready for occupancy, rentals. There's also a couple of private businesses, such as the tailor shop, the tanners, the sawmill down there in the lower left, the inn and the general store up towards the upper right, stables and corral. And it's a population of about 1,000 all up. Elven folk, which is why Booth doesn't exactly fit in. There are some racial tensions between the elves and the humans that dates back a few years, and they kind of look on a half-breed as not exactly sociably acceptable. Yes, some things never changed throughout the centuries. Why, I have no idea, but there you have it. This was going to be the original cover art, but the books couldn't get my sketches to print out that well because of the DPIs. That and using notebook paper wasn't exactly the best thing to do, but it's all I had at the time. Still, I think the sketch came out pretty well. I think I've improved over the years, just a little bit. Meanwhile, in returning to Gaiwan City, which is his hometown, he's hoping to find the family's farm, which was trashed and burnt out years ago, and find a way to get it fixed back up. Here it is. The layout of the Barbie Ranch is, family had a fairly sizable holding, 30-40 acres, which was pretty good for the time. And the main buildings were the, I can get my mouse up here. It keeps wanting to disappear on me. But basically it had a house and a barn and a pole corral out there for it. Those two buildings have burned down part way, but the roof of the barn still exists well enough to give shelter to Booth for temporary lodgings when he gets back there. He's used to camping out on the ground. And his old friend, Fang, a wolf, which had befriended him years ago after they both got into a mess with a bear trap and a bar, which missed the trap and somehow managed to get Booth pinned. Kid was only like 12 years old. Cut him some slack. He wasn't even a teenager, as we know the term. Elves basically live about 500 or 600 years if they avoid conflict. Unnatural causes, of course, will end their lives early. But they're not susceptible to as many diseases as a human is, according to legend. And therefore they have a much increased lifespan. Let me see here. What's next on our list of artwork? Oh, yes. While he's traveling back and forth between the town and the family's ranch, which is about 4.5, 5 miles outside of town. You could do it in a couple of hours on horseback. But I'm not too sure your rump would want you to do it that fast. Where was that picture at? It was filed here somewhere. I know it because I just looked at it. I was eyeballing the thing. Oh, yeah, there it is. He stops in at the town's inn and tavern. On the left, you see the first floor with the bar and the tables and the kitchen. Seating area, a set of stairs leading up to the second floor, which houses the rental rooms for overnight guests. This establishment is owned by Booth's former commanding general, General Raylan. Old friend. They've both been through enough bar fights together to not stand on formality. While he's staying there, he talks with his two old friends, his regimental commander, Colonel Stock, and his general, Colonel Raylan, or General Raylan, excuse me. Colonel Stock is your typical English aristocrat, complete with a monocle. Doesn't really need it, it's just plain glass, but it looks sharp. I mean, this guy has, the English aristocrat type attitude, and he just condescending all over the place, but he does it with humor. He's not stuck up about it. I want to try to develop his character a little bit more than what I did in the first book. Don't have any illustrations of Lady Bonington or any of the other cast of characters done up yet. I'm still working on those. It's an ongoing thing. I had envisioned a series of anywhere from 3 to 9 books, but don't look like that's going to happen. Meantime, Booth is asking around and trying to get information on a nasty little place called Tormund Castle. And we're told early in the book, Tormund sits on top of a hill. There's this little slope with a single road leading up to it. But the backside is like 400-foot cliffs, almost straight up, very few footholds. And it is a serious climbing obstacle. Most people, even today, wouldn't try to take one without assistance. It's in a valley near the Little River. Yes, most of my territories were based on old France, Spain, although I've renamed them for the sake of the game. Alternative universe type thinking. The surrounding slopes next to it, which these brown lines indicate slopes, how high the hill goes up in like 100-foot increments. And the closer the lines are together, the steeper the slope. As you can see right here, the hill facing on the backside of Tormund Castle is almost vertical. Very little slope to it at all, except for this little runoff for the creek. When it gets rainy, it's got a little gully down in there. There's a small pond or lake up on the backside of the castle, which collects a whole lot of rain, plus there's a natural underground stream runs through this whole valley. It kind of pushes up and feeds the lake. The small creek runs down through the middle of the castle. And yes, when the people built, they built an arch on two sides. They put iron bars in to block it off. And it allows a natural flow of water through there. During a siege, fresh water is never a problem. Food might not hold out, but they do have some small gardens inside. You're going to be eating a lot of salads in a case like that. And down below is a cemetery for the population of the castle. Yes, some people pass away of old age. They took that into account. And there's also a monastery with a rectory down there. Hasn't been used for years. But a local chaplain does occasionally stop in to visit just to keep the place cleaned up and in good repair. Mostly used for funerals for the local folk. Ooh, I'm going to need to resize this. Okay, the inner layout of the castle. You have a stable building on the back side of the outer keep, which actually makes up for part of the east wall. This thing is turned sideways. I can see about rotating that. Yeah, there we go. You can actually see my notes on it. Let me slide this over here just a little bit. Yeah, the stable forms up part of the east wall. It's also reinforced by a secondary wall inside, which connects in a square to the other walls and the four towers on the outside. There's also a supply storehouse over on the far side for crops, tools, and various other implements needed by the staff. There's a 48 by 48 manor house, a small storage shed, cookhouse, and bunk. Plus, the inside, the walls are actually set up as low barracks with a flat roof. The center of the inside is like a 9-foot wide hallway, and there are like 9 by 9 foot rooms spaced all the way down inside of the wall. That's for the garrison, and in some places along the back wall, the maids, butlers, cooks, and other staff live in one wing of it. Fairly well laid out place, to tell you the truth. Everybody's been thought of. Here is a colorized version of the sketch. The outside walls with the stable attachment, which actually surrounds the inner keep, which is what we just saw previously. The outer walls also have the same 9 by 9 by 9 layout with towers on the end, so it's actually a double castle. If an invading army should happen to breach the outside wall and make it into the garden area with the creek and the 6 barracks, which are back here on the back wall, they still have a second set of walls, including the stable and storehouse. That needs to be rotated also. I need to take that back to the right and get my mouse to show up. It disappears on me during this recording. Yeah, but even if they should happen to make it in through the south gate, which is the main gate, not a whole lot up here on the north side, although there is a small hole there at the creek where somebody could theoretically sneak in. If they do manage to get in through the south gate down here at the bottom, they still have a second set of walls and living complex to break into if they want to get to the nobles who live here. Now, these 6 brown blocks, 3 up here on the north, 3 down on the south, are basically barracks blocks that need rebuilt, which is where Booth gets the idea of sneaking in, carrying supplies to reconnoiter. The green patches down here are, like I said, gardens for the place. Yes, some of these walls, the rooms in the walls, are simply living quarters for gardeners and their families. Lady Bonington, Amanda Bonington, which is Booth's love interest, and her husband decided they were going to house and take care of their people comfortably, if not extravagantly. Of course, their hired help is just that, hired. They do get paid a wage, in addition to room and board. So they're comfortable. They're not rich, but they're comfortable, and they get to share crops. Anything that they grow, if they get a good haul, anything beyond what is needed for the immediate use of the castle itself, people, whatever comes out of their gardens, they can take down to the local farmers market, buy, sell, and trade. Some of the other things that appear in the story are here, along with Booth's semi-automatic crossbow. Basically, the cocking mechanism has a winch built inside the handle. The body of the bow itself is basically made up of 3 pieces, a flat piece across the bottom, 2 side pieces, and there's a small winch mechanism down in there with a couple of claws that hook up directly to the bowstring. And there's a leaf spring in there with 2 claw pins. When the trigger is pulled, basically the lever spring drops the 2 claw pins, which allows the bowstring to fly forward, throwing out the arrow. As soon as the trigger is released, the hooks snap back up into place. You then lower the crossbow to the ground, nose first, the front end of it here, right here. You then pull the string back until it reaches the 2 claws and locks. You're primed and ready to go again. You just need to drop another arrow into place and notch it on the string. The points of the 2 claws also act as your back sight, and basically you can look down through the 2 posts, which are standing on either side of the arrow, sight down the shaft of the arrow, and gives you a rudimentary aiming ability. The thing is a takedown. The bow arm itself, which runs sideways to the body, is held in place by a pair of butterfly screws and bolts. By unscrewing the butterflies, you can remove the bolt and take the bow itself off of the shoulder stock. The shoulder stock can then be put into a saddle boot, and the bow itself makes for a nice short bow, which can be used separately if you're riding around on horseback. A lot quicker, a lot easier, and smaller, more compact, easier to use from the back of a horse. So Booth actually has a 2-in-1 device to use here for his long-range tool. Now, while Booth is staying the first week down at the inn and making his business deals to get some wood for rebuilding the family, like I said, he stayed at the inn. And while he's sitting there one night, his 2 friends come down and they have a late night ham and beer party, raiding the pantry for snacks and having a drink, talking over old times and catching up. That's where General Raylan and Colonel Stock learn about Booth's quest to try to find out who it was that killed his parents, which has been 30 years in trying to get solved. Booth has his suspicions who did it, and it does not match up with the evidence that some people claimed pointed in one direction. Booth actually thinks instead of it being strangers from outside of town, It was actually somebody very close to home, and he needs help getting information, finding out who it was. That's the long-term, ongoing thread to the story. The short term is, of course, the rescue of Lady Bonington's daughter and getting that bounty off of his head. He's got enough arrest warrants out for him from where he's done other trade jobs that he doesn't need the local duchess coming after him. Besides the fact he thinks she's cute. Another thing that he uses is a wooden target that he set up, which is quite capable of being used at night. Basically, he just simply took a couple of 2x4s, hammered them onto a 4x8 to make a target, painted up a target on it. But then he mounted a little cast iron holding bracket on it so you could drop a torch into the one corner. That way, if it's nighttime, you can light the torch and it'll still light up the target well enough that you can do some late night target practice. Towards the end of the story, Booth has to make a rather sneaky but dramatic entrance into the castle. I'll get to a couple of illustrations like that. Here is a good close-up of the Barbie Ranch, which is his mom and dad's old place. They're building, the green buildings are going to be new barns and the new bunkhouse, which he's putting up for his crew and his livestock. The stone walls from the old house, although they are burnt out, are still fairly solid. He plans to re-roof and rebuild the inside of that at a later date. The old barn, the stone walls are kind of there, but they're a little more worn than what he'd like to see, so he's just going to scrap that. The old corral is getting scrapped and a brand new pole corral is being added. Basically, he has plans to improve and upgrade the whole place. During his travels throughout Gaiwan and in various other locales, here's another good close-up of the town, showing basically locations of the tanner shop, the tailor shop, the blacksmith, stockyard for wood, the residential houses. The yellow ones are occupied, the browns are ready for rental. The general store, the farmer's market, the roads leading in and out of town, a creek running down through there. The inn, the general store, and the livery stable, the jail are down here in the lower right corner, and various directions to the next biggest cities. While he's traveling around down there, he runs into a couple of would-be thieves that keep, for whatever reason, popping back up to irritate him, making attempts on him that they fail. They're calculated to fail. He knows they're calculated to fail. They know they're going to fail. He's still trying to figure out why. He never does figure it out. Actually, these two ladies have been sent by Lady Bonington to track and monitor his movements as best they can, and the failed attempts are a comical part of their plan. Basically, just to keep tabs on him and make sure he doesn't run out and run away, as he's been known to do on occasion if the situation gets hot. While he's building up the place, he's got to put together a herd of livestock because buying, selling, and trading horses is going to be his quickest way to raise cash for his building projects. And of course, when you break a horse or you buy a horse for your ranch, you're going to have to mark him somehow. That's usually done by branding back in this period of time. And there's a basic pattern to where the brands are located that will tell you when and where the horse is to be used. I have a mark's going on the right front shoulder. He's not for sale. He's pretty much being used as breeding stock. If it's on the right rear, it's pretty much considered breeding stock, but it's tradable. You can buy, sell, and haggle on that. On the left rear is your ranch stock, which are breeding stock, but they're not for sale. And then up here on the left front, okay, is your non-tradable stock for use for the ranch hands and what have you. Each location has a different meaning, and each meaning, just by looking at the horse, you can tell when and where the livestock is to be used or traded off or whatever. Let me see here. Where was that photo I was just looking? Oh, yes. Like I was saying before, at one point, Booth has to make a entry. He's hoping to get by unnoticed, but he's caught by a sentry. The guy is about to raise an alarm, and Booth has to silence him. He doesn't really want to, but because he's not being paid for an assassination at this time. That was Booth's other job, by the way. He posed as a merchant traveling from town to town with his 3-horse string, bringing him rare goods and commodities. But usually when he traveled to and from a town, it was because the guild had put a job out to him, and he was either to obtain information, obtain an item, or eliminate a threat, or a pest, if you will. Depends on what the contract was out there for and how it was worded. Yes, he did some things to keep himself alive he's not exactly proud of, but some of it also established his cover while he was working as a spy during the Goblin Wars with the general and the colonel. So some of it couldn't be helped, but there are still arrest warrants out for him. And one of his best friends from his days of sailing, back with Lady Bonington, also part of an intelligence gathering mission for General Raylan. He could travel around a lot easier that way. So it was just simply a matter of convenience, but he fell in love with the girl and it became something a little bit more. Basically, he has arrest warrants out on him, and his best friend from his sailing days is the local sheriff of the next county. So, while he's trying to rescue the girl and trying to dodge Lady Bonington's gang of cutthroats who are extremely loyal, the old crew from the Mouser, her frigate that she used for pirating back in her wild and woolly days, his best friend is looking for him to get him for these arrest warrants that nobody's been able to prove that he actually did the job. So, he's got his job cut out for him trying to track down Booth. While busting into the castle, Booth has to perform another assassination. It's not one he wanted, but a sentry up on the guard happened to be a little bit too alert and spotted him coming over the wall and was about to raise the alarm, which is Booth's plan for getting the girl back relatively silently would have been totally undone had that been allowed to happen. Quick dagger work to the neck, and the guy is taken out relatively quickly. But it's still something that doesn't sit too well with him, and that is going to cause a problem in the second book if I ever set back down in writing. Because the guy was well liked by just about everybody in the castle. When they find out that Booth was the person who broke into the castle and actually killed the guy in the process, there's going to be Denise's boyfriend and a whole bunch of other people ready to come after Booth. And Booth is not the type to indulge in a stand-up fight if he can take it. Sneaky is a little more his style. But yeah, it's one of those things that just simply happened. I had to put something a little bit serious into the book, just to keep the plots from getting all comedy. Trying to a little bit of seriousness, a little bit of romance, a little bit of humor. I don't think I succeeded too well, but After taking out the sentry, Booth does manage to make it inside the building. Unfortunately, he was also cornered inside by the local guards, and after a brief fist fight, ended up being knocked unconscious and taken prisoner. That's when he finds the other twist to the story. I'm going to leave that one hang. Are they evil? Basically, I think that's about all the artwork that I had to enclose in this one. There's a lot more that I wanted to do, but I just basically never got around to sketching it up. Of course, there's Booth here. The picture of Booth up here, which you've probably seen before, yes, this is our main character, is after he shaved off his mustache. Now, normally he wears his hair long to cover his ears, and he wears a mustache to conceal the fact that he's half-elf. But on some days he decides the disguise is not going to do him much good, and he will make alterations as needed, given a specific mission. There's a image of the artwork and how they're going to pop up in and about various portions of the book. But yeah, I had a lot of fun writing it, even though it was a pain over a 10-year period. I did manage to get the thing done with the help of Mike, a friend of my nephew's, actually, who had dropped in. Mike, his brother Joe, and Joe's wife Tara, he had come down here with my nephew Jeff and Heather for a while. We're living down here. They moved back up to, I think, Ohio or Indiana. But yeah, while they were down here, he spent a couple years. We get together over coffee and pipes, and yeah, between my dictation and his typing, which is a heck of a lot more accurate and a heck of a lot faster than mine, I actually managed to get this thing done. The thing of it is, when the one computer crashed and I had lost the entire manuscript in it because I didn't have it backed up anywhere, I kind of got disheartened. I really didn't want to start over. It was my wife, Dorothy, and Mike's offer to help out with the typing that actually got me motivated into putting my brain to this and actually getting the story finished. Oh, the use of the crossbow, when I'm talking about it in a chapter in the book, the two visitors are coming back to visit again, only this time they're going to try to break into the barn on the property and see what they can get into. The first attempt is repulsed by a mule, and the second attempt they run into Booth while he's doing target practice. The result is that a flaming arrow stuck into a tree makes a pretty good torch to light up the area, and the second shot caught the first guy's hat and pinned it to the ground. That's how close they were to getting nicked before they up and ran off. I actually think this sketch came out pretty good, given the limited amount of time I put in on it. I do like my colored pencils. I can give me a ballpoint pen, some paper, and a couple of colored pencils. I can usually crank out something if I really wanted to work at it. This was the original thing before I darkened it into 450 dots per inch, which the company wanted for printing purposes. But I still think it came out as a pretty good sketch just for 15-20 minutes worth of work. But yeah, anyhow, that's a basic review of the illustrated version of the book. These things pop up at various places. These pictures pop up at various places in the book, in conjunction with their location in the story, whether somebody's explaining about the town or describing the way a device works, or just basic events that's going on. Frankly, I looked at the proof online, even though I haven't ordered it yet. I thought it came out pretty good for a piker with no talent and a GED education. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed the little video. It's probably a little bit longer than what I wanted to do, but I wanted to get this to you because it may be a while before I scrounge up the $60 to get a copy of the book proofed and sent out to you. And I can't, it's not selling right now until I order the proof. So you got a signed first edition coming. Bear with me. This is Cliff Manning, aka Clifford M. Deal. Have a nice night.